Many thanks to Fatal Attraction Vanilla servers, Atlas, one original DayZ servers, Clash Vanilla servers, Sgt. Pepper's DayZ Invasion server, Sea of Tools Cloud, Neo Farmers servers, BK Free World servers, and Double Tap for making this video possible. DayZ Update 1.26 has just been released to experimental for us to check out, which is the patch that will contain Frostline. So I've given it all a quick look to go over all of the new stuff and the huge amount of changes that have come with this update. One of the most controversial changes this patch is how the meat from wolves and bears will be infected, meaning if you eat it, you will get a disease. This disease will make you vomit and gives you a fever with the pain sounds that come with that, but I don't believe it's deadly to have this disease, at least in the first stage. At this current stage in the experimental, there's no warning that this disease will come with eating the meat. The description does say you can eat this in a pinch and it should be cooked, but even when cooked, it will give you the disease, and you get the disease quite easily too. There's no warning of this disease. The meat looks exactly the same as other meat in the game. Fishing has completely changed this patch, so instead of sitting there waiting to catch a fish by holding the button, you can now release the button when you hear the splash or see the splash in the water. This makes fishing a lot more interactive and, in my opinion, a lot more interesting too. There's also better mechanics for gathering worms faster, so the shovel will not only have a faster animation, but you can collect 3 worms in one animation, whereas a knife will only allow you to collect 1 worm per animation, and worms can finally be stacked. There's also a new wooden fishing hook that can be crafted with a sharp tool and a wooden stick, very simple, and a new hook that allows us to fish without needing any worms at all, called the jig. And finally, for fishing, eating raw fish will now cause food poisoning instead of salmonella, and the nutrition of fish has changed, but I haven't looked at the numbers yet. Items left on the floor will now change in temperature based on the server temperature, but from my brief tests it looks like this only applies to food and drinks, with them possibly getting so cold that they freeze and you have to warm them up in order to eat them or drink them. However, if you warm them up too much, they will become hot and they will damage you when you eat or drink the consumable, which also interrupts the animation, so it's going to be really difficult to unalive yourself or other people using this method. The temperature of the food you consume will change your temperature, and when a chilly, cold or frozen item is placed inside your inventory, you get colder, but the temperature of those items stabilize to match your body temperature, so they kind of meet halfway. So you lower your temperature, but you raise the temperature of the item that's cold inside your inventory. So it'll be interesting to see if we can thaw food just by placing it in our inventory or between our butt cheeks. As for other changes, you don't instantly lose health when you go into water when the temperature is very cold. It appears to be a lot more realistic now, with the addition of extra down and up arrows on the temperature icon to show us the speed we're cooling or warming. Also, sitting inside a vehicle will now set your character's heat comfort to neutral, but only when the engine is running. This is going to be really useful because neutral is this white color here. At the moment, vehicles do warm us up, but nowhere near enough to get us to neutral on a colder server. So on Sakao, I believe vehicles are going to be extra powerful. Heat packs also cool down over a longer period of time, so they will warm us up for longer and give drastically more benefits too. You cannot construct garden plots on cold servers though. A new heat buffer stat icon is in the game, which tells us a lot more info about the current heat buffer stat value, how much extra protection we have from the cold. This is what the heat buffer stat does. This stat takes about the same amount of time to fill as it did before. I'm guessing they just changed the icon, they didn't change any mechanics related to the heat buffer stat. How long it takes you to get the heat buffer stat and the conditions needed to get the heat buffer stat are probably the same. I believe we simply just have more information now that this icon has changed. It appears that any action that is continuous will lock your character within a certain angle, but this is extremely unreliable at the moment, as sometimes you can do the full exorcist and go all the way around 360, but I'm guessing when it is working, it will be reserved for any animation that is continuous but doesn't allow you to move while you're doing that animation. So it will only restrict you when, say, digging for worms, drinking from wells, or cutting down trees with an axe, whereas you won't get this camera restriction when you're loading ammo into a mag or eating, for example, although that's just a guess. We can't fully test this at the moment. Another thing we can't fully test is Pneumonia. It's in 1.26 in the form of the 3rd stage of getting the common cold, but due to issues with servers on 1.26, I couldn't test it to get an idea of the symptoms. What we do know though is that when you get the common cold and you cure it, you will temporarily have an immunity boost against the common cold, against catching it again like you would in real life, and morphine and codeine will stop you from sneezing and coughing. Full guide soon when I have access to a server. There's now settings for individually increasing the terrain and object distance in DayZ, allowing us to get insane view distances that will make many PC players very happy, I'm sure. In most situations I had a solid 60 FPS when everything was loaded in, so after the initial load. Even while in a vehicle going through some of the bigger towns in the game at 123 km/h, but I did notice some choppiness when looking from left to right very quickly in larger towns. This is my setup, which isn't the best, but it's not bad either. So if you've got at least this much power, you should be good to go to crank up the view distance to max, but you can have alternative settings, so you can go halfway, for example, which really does make the game look better. This looks so much better. And Northwest Airfield, you can see the whole thing. You can see all the way to Bash. You can see the tower at Bash as well, instead of the 2005 wall of fog that we previously had. The inventory size of several pieces of gear, namely tops, pants and vests, has been reduced. This seems to be mostly low tier items, as shown by Jackal here on Reddit, but many high tier pieces of equipment still allow you to carry a huge amount of equipment, so I doubt players will notice this change unless you tell them about it. 2 new animals are added in this patch, or rather re-added with new textures: the red fox with some very cool animations, and the brown hare too. It is possible to kill the fox at least with melee weapons, and you can kill the hare as well if you're quick, but there's still very much worth shooting to get the loot. You get 4 rabbit legs from the hare, and you get loads of meat from the fox. The fox meat, by the way, is not considered infected, so you can eat this and not get the disease that you get from wolves and bears, and you can carry them around as well for the memes. I haven't fully tested it, but traps in water now play a particle effect when you catch a fish. They reduce the damage taken by traps each and every catch, increase the chance of catching an animal with traps, and reduce the time required for traps to catch an animal too. It seems like they really want us to get animals with traps. I'll test this fully in a future video. Wolves that you don't headshot to kill will drop a wolf headdress when you skin them. The shamag is a new item that can be used as a scarf or a hood, but not both. They rebalance the insulation values of most clothing items, probably to make them more useful and sakau, and our gear will now take less damage from infected attacks. Amazingly, you can now climb out of water during the swim animation, but only onto objects within your reach, like climbing onto a wall. This doesn't work very well onto rocks, so on rocks you're going to have a difficult time getting out of the water still, but any flat ledge you will be able to jump up on there very easily. It's a very nice touch. There are no longer any soft skills in DayZ. They've been removed due to animation desynchronization. They have disappeared from the inventory screen, and there's no indication that they're ever going to come back. Grass will now bend under animals and infected, but it slowly gets back up, so you can't follow the trail of infected, for example. Firewood is now stackable up to 3 firewood. It now takes up less slots in your inventory. It has a new model, and it can be broken down into 3 wooden sticks per log with a sharp object. Official servers will now have server authentication, which should hide all fake Chinese official servers in the server browser. You know, the ones that were on the Namausk official, for example. You can now sort by map, and server owners can add a description for each server. We also get a friendly reminder that we don't have any friends, but that's okay because we're not alive anyway. There's a new weather settings API for modders to get more control over weather on certain servers, so they can have a cold server or a really rainy server. There's a lot of fog near the coast in lowlands, and this fog remains there all day, not just in the morning. It's all day long you have this fog. They decrease the hydration from food that is cooked. Force feeding is now only possible when you're facing a character and they're facing you. And there's been a lot of rebalancing of clothing and firearms too, but I'm guessing this is only related to the spawn chances that they have on each map, not necessarily the stats like damage or armor on these pieces of gear. I'll have to investigate further, obviously. I have made a separate video with more details on 1.26 here, as I've covered a lot of this patch already, but if you have seen that video too, those are the details in 1.26 that I believe everybody should be aware of as a first look into this update, which I'll go into a lot more detail in future videos like I usually do. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.